Okay, thanks. We're going to have Martin Lepkowski from Witness for Peace speak next. Martin.
I'm not gonna use this at all. I'm gonna yell out, and those of you that can get closer, it's just better to get closer. So even that, you guys should come a little closer over here so you can hear. You're so far away. Come on. Anyway, we're gathered here today to celebrate the International Day of Peace.
Yes.
When we think of peace, we immediately think of a escalating of armed conflict or reining in a military budget. We think of beating of swords at the plowshares and spears at the pruning hooks. But there is oftentimes a more insidious form of warfare, a hidden behind closed doors policy that is cooked up by the State Department. I'm speaking of trade embargoes, sanctions, and blockades of goods against countries that we simply do not like. Presently, the Treasury, Commerce, and the State Department have trade embargoes or sanctions against 29 countries. We have environmental disaster. We have hurricanes. We have a coronavirus spreading throughout the world, and we have sanctions against 29 countries. One of these countries, especially hit hardest, is the sovereign country of Cuba. For over 60 years, we have had an embargo against Cuba. We have brought misery to that island, food shortages to that island, medical supplies shortages to that island. In 1960, I have a memorandum here from the State Department that simply states that the only way to bring the Cuban people down is to make them hungry. It's stated right here, to make them hungry, so that they will then in turn overthrow their government. This is unconscionable, but this has been going on for 60 years. Under the Trump administration, Cuba was designated as a state of terrorism, which added 200 more sanctions on Cuba. And this is why there are lines in Cuba now where people have to line up to get food. They can't get access to fuel. There's embargoes. There's 29 oil companies that refuse to do business with Cuba because Cuba is designated as a state of terrorism. This is unconscionable. And the Biden administration has done nothing to lift these sanctions. There was a resolution in the UN in June of this year. And in the United Nations, they voted 184 to 2 to stop this blockade. The two countries that voted to extend the blockade and keep it going was the United States and Israel.
Wow.
This continues to this present moment. Biden has promised that he was going to lift some of these sanctions, but he has not done this. This is why we need to get on the phone. We need to call the State Department. We need to call Biden. We need to call our representatives and say, enough. We have a pandemic. We have climate change. We have people suffering, and we need these sanctions stopped.
Long live Cuba!
As the pandemic magnifies the devastation of the U.S. blockade, the blockade in turn has made it harder for Cuba to grapple with the pandemic. Among other things, the blockade has stopped medical aid, money transfers from overseas companies, humanitarian organizations, and denied the Cuban people the ability to use Zoom, prevented the country's purchase of ventilators, and causes a shortage of personnel equipment. Cuba said earlier this month that the decades-old U.S. embargo has cost them more than $9 billion, hurting its ability to tackle the pandemic. Like the virus, the blockade asphyxiates and kills. We need to stop it. We need to make those phone calls. Thank you.